Hello and welcome back to the Run Lift Eat Evolve podcast. This is a special guest interview with Sam Littlewood. How are we doing, Sam? You all right?
Good, tell you.
Yeah, good, mate. Good.
Nice one.
So I met Sam in the back in the army. We went through phase 2 of our Royal Engineer training together back in 2005.
Way back.
It would have been, wasn't it? Yeah. So I met Sam in 2005 in phase 2 training, and then I was in the army for 8 years, and Sam's been in the army since 2004. So what's this? Your 15 years now?
Yeah, I've just gone past my 15-year point. So yeah, coming to
15-year point in the British Army. There we go. So Sam was in Royal Engineers 2005 to 2015, and then he went to the PT Corps, the Army Physical Training Corps in 2015, and you've been there for the last 5 years, right?
4 years now. Yeah, so be the fifth.
Yeah, coming up. Yeah.
Fifth year in December.
So in the PT Corps, well, that's your professional career, and in your sporting career, you played rugby for a bit, and lost a tooth, and then you've moved into very much endurance sports and endurance cycling, and triathlon's very much your thing now, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So back in 2005, all the way through to about probably 2012, I was hitting the rugby, as you alluded to. Lost a couple of teeth. Thought might need to change paths here. So I went and did a bit of CrossFit from 2012 through to about 2016ish, and then fell in love with triathlon. So and here we are now.
You ended up in triathlon, and you've been doing pretty well at that, to be fair, haven't you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. I think I found a niche. I think I found
yeah.
where I like.
Yeah, I think you've been doing pretty well at that. So with that, then, what? Let's talk about that first. So what? Well, the point of this podcast is that we're going to cover indoor cycling. I should have said that in the intro, but we're going to cover a lot of indoor cycling and how that's absolutely boomed over the last year, especially this year with the pandemic, and just how people can get into indoor cycling. But before that, what kind of races and events have you got coming up this year? Because you're someone with always a packed diary of events. So what's kind of like your, because I know things are going to change, right? You probably had quite a lot of cancelled events like I have. What's kind of like your main events still penciled in for the year, and what's like your priority so far?
Yeah, so at the minute, I'm obviously part of the Army triathlon team, so we're working towards that inter-services. So we're inter-services champions from last year, and we're just hoping to follow that through to this year. So I've got the inter-services coming up. They're supposed to be in July, but just obviously playing that by ear with what's going on with the pandemic. And then sort of personal race-wise, I'm doing Ironman Weymouth, which is the 70.3. That's towards the back end of the year, September, so fingers crossed that should go ahead. And I'm looking to hopefully qualify for the World Champs from that, so we'll see how we go.
So there you go. Right, very good. So then, so let's talk about your training. So at the moment, what's kind of your main focus at the moment?
Main focus at the moment is just sort of building up the miles. So I'm just working through slowly building those miles up and getting the base miles throughout winter into my legs, not trying to hammer myself, so to speak, like not redlining, trying to work on that 80-20 sort of basis. And then just using sort of indoor cycling, especially with the pandemic going on in this rubbish weather. It's just ideal to those indoor cycling.
So 80-20 being 80% kind of at zone kind of 2, a little bit into zone 3, kind of 1 and 2, and then 20% of your week being intense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. So then let's talk about indoor cycling, because you got me into indoor cycling. So for me, 2020 was a year I moved into cycling. I've done a few sprint triathlons when I was in the army. Then I'd had a huge break because then I got back into rugby. I got into rugby when you left, and you got into cycling, and I got out of cycling then. So then I've got back into cycling in 2012, and then you introduced me to indoor cycling. So indoor cycling is so much better than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, it's changed a lot since I first had to go, and like I think the biggest change is obviously the technology and the kit, right? The turbos are just absolutely brilliant now. So which turbo are you using at the moment? Well, you've had a few, haven't you?
Yeah, so I started off with very, very basic sort of 30-pound one that was literally tire onto the back and just go for it, and you change your gear on like an old school lever, which is good for novices just to get the miles in, but there was no sort of technology with it. It was just on and go. Then I had a Elite. Can't remember the exact model, but it was an Elite one, which was connected to a Bluetooth, but it wasn't. It was like an in between a smart trainer and a non-smart trainer. So you didn't get the power, but the technology was able to transfer your sort of speed of the wheel into a kind of average power. And then the one I've got now is a S, which is a smart trainer. which now is like all singing, all dancing, gives you power, gives you RPM and cadence.
Yeah, you've got the Tacx Flux S, is that right?
Tacx Flux S, yeah.
Yeah, so that's their beginning model, isn't it? Because they've got 3 tiers, haven't they?
The Flux, then the Flux S, then they've got the Neo. I think it's called the Neo, and then the Neo.
Yeah. But even at the Flux S, that's still. I mean, you've had no dramas with it since you've had it. It's been brilliant, right?
Yeah.
And I see the type of scary wattage numbers you can put out, so it can definitely take a bit of power. Yeah, I've got the Wahoo Kickr core. So Wahoo have 3 styles. They have the Wahoo Kickr, Wahoo Kickr core, and then they have the Wahoo Snap. And the Snap is where you still have your back wheel on, but it still enables you to use Swift in games. So the Wahoo core is their middle tier, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. So it's incredibly well made. And yeah, let's talk about the features. So the direct drive smart trainers basically just interact with the computer, don't they?
Yeah.
And whatever game you're playing.
Yeah. It's like,
as in they change for their wheels.
Yeah, if you imagine it like a artificial leg, so you take your back wheel off and you put your back wheel, or where your back wheel was is where your trainer goes for the direct drives. Whereas some of the older sort of bottom end sort of trainers, your back wheel stays on. Whereas this one, it's more of a realistic feel with the road.
Yeah, more realistic feel, and the game you play, when you go up hills, it changes, doesn't it? It changes the resistance in the drum. When you go downhill, it changes, and then it also has the drafting effect as well, doesn't it? When you're in a pack and race, and then so that's the actual turbo itself, and then software. You've always went to Swift, have you? Or have you tried any others?
I've always predominantly used Swift. I've tried some of the free sort of trials on. Like Ruby, which is supposed to be more realistic. I had a little go on that.
Mm-hmm.
For what I needed, Swift was perfect.
I've loved it.
Yeah. Before,
I mean,
I used to use the old sort of turbo trainer where it was not connected. All I used to do was stick a YouTube video on, just pass the way on that.
Right, and then just spin instead of actually doing a structured program or whatever, or race.
Yeah.
And probably like racing's. The structured program's great. The structured program basically turns your bike into a watt bike.
Yeah.
And watt bike being a $3,000, $2,500. Amazing bit of kit. You can get something very similar for the sake of just having your bike on a turbo, right? And you can then have prescribed workouts where you're trying to hit a certain wattage for a certain amount of time to get a different training stimulus, right? Yeah. And then I guess the most fun you can have on Swift is racing.
Yeah, definitely.
You got. Definitely within a race is the hardest I'll work on Swift. Yeah. So let's quickly talk about the racing, and then we talk about how to get into indoor cycling, and then like some steps.
Yeah, so with racing, same with any sort of racing, same with anything that's online. You just got to be careful where you put yourself within that sort of categories. There'll be people in all sorts of categories that are well above where they should be, and you'll know that through experience.
Yeah.
People in the wrong categories, but it's all about just having fun. Getting into them races and figuring out how Zwift works. It's not a case of, right, I'll sit in the pack and do this, do that. Over time, over so many races, you'll figure out how Zwift works and how it benefits and how you can race your own sort of race.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot. I mean, we're doing the Army cycling indoor comp at the moment. Yeah, the series we're running, which is for 8 weeks, and we're 2 workouts in. And I'm learning a lot every single week of how not to get dropped in the first 2 minutes on a race. Yeah, unlike in traditional cycling on the road, Swift starts at max effort, doesn't it?
You are out the gates at Mach 10.
Yeah, you're basically so when if you've never done this before, when you join a race, you sit on the start line on a virtual turbo, and it gives you a 3, 2, 1, so you can really build your speed up. So everybody's hitting their max wattage. We're sprinting out the gate, and then packs get formed, and then the lead pack then just keeps trying to make breakaways. Everyone splinters off, and it's there's nothing more stressful than being dropped off a pack and seeing the pack disappear into the distance. Yeah, and I've experienced that over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, but the Army are doing this racing series for people that are kind of. Well, it's just for forces, isn't it? It's just not just armies.
Anyone can join them. It's just a platform that we can use to be able to do our sort of inter-services. Normally we do like crit races around certain racetracks around the UK, but with obviously the pandemic, we're having to do it all online. It just gives us a good platform to do all our results together.
It's good for me because it's for like regulars, reserves, and veterans. Me going for top veteran is the ultimate goal there. I'm probably a little bit off that. Right, okay, so then, right, you're starting on Swift. Where's the starting point? I mean, when I started, it's FTP testing, isn't it? In cycling, you measure your fitness, you measure by progress, everything via your basically FTP test, right?
All depending on what you want, right. What you want to get out of Zwift. If you're looking to go from A to B and progress, then ideally, yeah, you want to do your FTP test, because then your FTP score will give you the building blocks. Then if you go into a program, it'll take that calculation and then build your program around your FTP score. And if you do subscribe to Zwift, there's thousands upon thousands of workouts that you can do that will come from your.
Yeah, Swift's only like $12.99 a month, isn't it? Or something like that. We don't work for Zwift, by the way, or Wahoo, or any of these turbos. It's just stuff that we're using. So with that, let's talk about FTP testing a bit more. What does it stand for, and what kind of metrics does it give you?
Yeah, so FTP test, obviously your functional threshold power, it's ideally supposed to give you the wattage that you can hold or sustain for an hour period. It'll give you a rough sort of guide, and then the score that it gives you will then be used within other programs to be able to build up and work around your sort of zones. So zone 1 to 6, zone 1 being like really easy, nice, steady sort of Sunday afternoon riding, zone being like max effort. So it'll just use that zone 1 to 6 and split up your FTP score where it needs to be for certain.
Yeah, and that would near enough match your heart rate as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Yeah. So with the FTP testing, there's 3 ways of testing, isn't there? There's a ramp test where you go up every minute, 20 watts every minute, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Until you reach a point you can't hold that wattage for 1 minute, and then it'll give you your score. There's the actual FTP 1 hour test.
Yeah. Which is
I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, that's the.
Have you tried doing that?
I've not done it as yet, but it's supposed to be one of the most accurate ones.
Yeah, and then the most popular is the 20-minute test, isn't it?
20 minutes, and then it gives you like a 95% of that score to give you your rough FTP.
Yeah. But what's good about Zwift is that you could do an FTP test, and if you're just joining indoor cycling, or even if you're in the gym and you've got a watt bike, you should definitely do an FTP test, because that will just give you all your numbers to then work off in the future, so you're not just going in blind and knowing what to hit. Once you've got your FTP score, sometimes you do mess up that test, don't you, where you just go too hard or too short. But what I find is a lot of people actually then get a new FTP score, especially when you first start during hard workouts. So when you do like a race, you know that your FTP might then change because you've done a hard 20-minute period in that race, right?
Yeah. Zwift itself will recognise when you're putting in hard efforts, and in fact your FTP is probably a little bit higher than what it is, and it'll adjust it throughout your work.
Yeah, adjust it. Yeah. Okay, so advice for new people then. I mean, because in November you told me to buy one of these because the weather's just changing. And it's been really cold recently, but in November it's just changing and it's just raining all the time. You told me to get one, and it's a great investment for me. Yeah. But like, if people are starting out, they pick up a turbo. What's kind of like your go-to kind of, what would you advise them to do if once they first start out on Zwift or indoor training?
All depends on what that person wants out of the turbo. Do they want to do it just so they can spin the legs? Are they coming back from an injury? Do they want to use it for performance enhancing? So do they want it to obviously progress their way through sort of their fitness, or are they wanting it just for like a social? So if you're looking for like that
social and do group rides and races and stuff,
social sort of aspect, then sort of trainers we've got would be ideal. I'd always recommend getting a direct drive over a wheel on, just for that feel, and for the fact that you're taking your wheel off and you're saving your wheel for when you're actually going to go outdoors.
Yeah.
I know you can get turbo ties and stuff like that.
You know, I mean, yours. I mean, like between ours, I think it's like £550 to £700, but it's 100% worth it for the amount of time you do on it, doesn't it?
Especially with the weather. Yeah. The British weather is always unpredictable, and with the pandemic as well, you never know when we're going to be able to go back outside properly and get a good peloton together. Whereas with Zwift,
well, I did. I did a YouTube video on should you buy a turbo, and like one of my biggest points was as well is you get used to riding your own bike, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You get used to I've sent you some videos before about my seat height, and you've told me we'd move it forward and back and up and down, and all those fine little adjustments you just don't make on the road. You can make them and just get used to riding in the drops. And it sounds basic, riding in the drops, but over time you get used to it. You know, you get a bit more mobility in your back and you can sit lower. Then that's going to add up when you're actually on the road. And you do the same because you have your tri-bar set, don't you?
Yeah, I've got my triathlon
So you just
bike
get
on my
used to laying in that position.
I'm constantly doing as much of my work as I can in my aero position, just to get my body used to being in that tucked away position. It's just
because you can't practice out in the road, really, can you?
Especially,
you can't practice now unless there's an empty road. You're not really going to be laying down for an hour in that position. Good. Yeah. So so everyone's always chasing a bit of performance. So you've done quite a few of their programs, haven't you, on Swift? I've done the FTP booster plan for 6 weeks, which I thought was really good. That really helped me. There was a lot of like foundation work to get me used to spinning at different, cadences. Like, I think when everyone first starts out cycling, you're very much a grinder, aren't you? Like 75, 80 RPM, and when you're on these workouts, they teach you to spin at 100, 90, 95 RPM. So I found it. FTP booster plan helped me a lot with that. What other programs have you done?
So I'm currently on what's called a Build Me Up program. So
that looks tough.
Yeah, it's not.
That's an intermediate level, isn't it?
Yeah, it's intermediate level, heading towards sort of like prepping people for Olympic and above sort of distance races. So with me being like an endurance athlete with Ironmans and that, I'm looking to do them longer sort of bikes, so 3 to 4 hours on a bike. So these workouts are designed to get you sitting at them sort of percentages of wattages that you're going to be doing when you're actually putting those race efforts in for that amount of time.
Do you use it to do brick training as well, just because of that lack of admin?
Yeah, for brick training, brick being like a run and a bike sort of workout together, or bike and run, or swim, even swim and biking. It's always important to do that prior to going to do a race. So I'll always build that in about 12 weeks out from a race. So if I know I've got a race coming up in the next 2 or 3 months, then at least once a week I'll build in a good solid bike ride with then just a short run off the end of it, just to get those used to coming off the bike and running, and then I'll follow it up the following day normally with a really good run. Where you're doing that really good run on tired legs.
Yeah, and I guess Turbo's great for like the lack of admin of bringing your bike in, carrying it in your house, and then putting trainers on to go. You don't need to practice those transitions every single week. You're running around your back gate, locking your back gate, then going running. Yeah, it's just so much easier with a Turbo. Okay, so new cyclists, just get a program. FTP Booster is what I recommend people start with. You've done the Build Me Up. Have you done any others on there you recommend?
So I've just dipped in every now and then. So you can go onto the Zwift and there's the list of all the programs. So it's just, if you're short on time, you can pick a 45-minute one. If you've got plenty of time, pick an hour and a half one. And then just loads on there you can choose from. So I've just dipped in and out of quite a few. There's some really good ones on.
Okay, so then for the more experienced riders that haven't tried indoor, that just love getting outside, but now they're looking at getting a Turbo, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Do their research. Definitely do their research. If they're experienced riders and they're putting out monster watts, then they'll want to be going towards the higher end sort of turbos, because some of them will only register up to say like 12,000 watts, 1,200 watts, 1,300 watts. So if they're big lads, big sprinters, they're going to be wanting pushing out 1,600 watts. They're going to need They're going to need a better sort of trainer. So yeah, just do your research beforehand.
Yeah, and the good thing is, like with like the programs, it does put you into categories. We touched on that earlier. So categories are based off watts per kilo, isn't it? That's how you're measured in cycling.
Yeah.
Watts per kilo being your FTP divided by your weight.
It's all done on your weight, yeah. So people get quite hung up on FTP. So for example, let's say I've got FTP of 250, you've got an FTP of 260. I'll be like, I really want to be beating Dell. But that doesn't matter, because I might weigh 20 kilos more than Dell, so I'm going to be putting out more watts anyway. It's all about that watts per kilo, how much power you can put through per 1 kilo of weight. Which is
and that's what the races are separating. Like the top tier is 4 watts per kilo, 4 to 5 watts per kilo, isn't it? And then it goes 3.5, no, 3.2 to 4.
Yeah, 3.2 to 4, then 2.2 to 3.2, and then 2 and below.
Yeah, so like in theory, you should be able to win your category. If you do an FTP test, you put your weight in, you see what your kind of almost top watts per kilo is, you should be able to win your category if you race well. But there's so much to a race with tactics and stuff, and then you should be in that category. And like you say, some people will be, in a tier B, in a tier C race when they should be a tier B. The odd person does that. But Swift Power has been made to kind of catch people out of that, hasn't it? Hasn't it?
Pushing to leagues as well, yeah. So, for example, like last week in the army races, I was in League B. I managed to win the race last week, and now I've been automatically promoted to League A. So next week, I'm gonna be hanging out at the back of the.
Yeah, you're gonna be
facing.
Yeah, but that's a good challenge, mate. You made it to tier A.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm down in C at the moment, doing all right, sitting in the middle. The goal is to get to B and then be at the back of B and then eventually work our way up. But yeah, well, yeah, congratulations to making it to tier A. You've got some hard races ahead of you now.
And if it's good news or not, to be fair, but we'll take it.
4 watts per kilo for the whole race would put you last. That's good to know, isn't it?
Oh,
Lovely. Right, okay. Cool, I think we covered some good stuff there. So kind of, let's just close it up and summarise what we've been talking about. So, should people buy a turbo and things to consider? A few snap points.
Absolutely.
Go.
If you're into your cycling and you're not keen on getting out in the really horrible mornings, even for people that work in the mornings and got to be out the door by 8 o'clock, having to put all that kit on in the winter to get out to go and do an hour, jumping on a turbo takes a set of bib shorts. And you're on your turbo, in your hour, you're off your turbo, you're in the shower. It's just for ease of use as well. 100% recommend.
Yeah, and then there's a social aspect, isn't there, as well? So it's funny how social it can be. You're in a race of people you don't know. It still feels quite social. You know, I was in a race last Wednesday with 165 people. It was crazy. And you just all run off as a pack together. You see some people writing comments and doing ride-ons, which is a thumb up on Swift. That's quite cool. And then I've got Friday Night Lights. If you don't know, that's my Friday night cycling group that we put together, and we're doing some of the harder, more challenging routes on Swift. And you've done the last 3 with me.
Yeah.
And they've been good, haven't they? We all just jumped on and
social.
So Swift are broken. No, there's I think about 85 routes on Swift, and they're broken into kind of how long they're going to take and how challenging they are. So over the 8 Fridays, I said we're just going to do some of the more challenging routes that we covered. A 61k one on Friday, which was pretty good, wasn't it? There were quite a lot of little sprints throughout and some King in the Mountains in between. So I think on a social aspect, it's a great platform as well, right? Yeah. And I know you love a long 5-hour stint on Swift on the weekend. That seems to be your thing at the moment. Okay, so should it buy a turbo? Absolutely. Thing to consider. Yeah, that's all you need, isn't it? You buy the turbo, you need a fan, you need a towel for your handlebars, a couple of wall balls, and a pair of bib shorts, and you're good to go. Things to consider then is just check the wattage, depending on how much of an experienced rider you are, how much power output you're going to do.
Do your research. There's plenty, like the Facebook and social media nowadays, the forums that you can find on there, just by typing in, looking at buying a turbo trainer, blah 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 blah. What do you recommend? And then you'll get thousands of comments and just.
I think the 2 brands we're using at the moment, Wahoo and Tacx, are kind of like the leading kind of brands in with this, because wasn't the World Champs done on the Tacx Neo?
Tacx Neo, yeah.
Yeah, so and they all have to like weigh in and show their weight and heart rate and everything throughout, didn't they? But yeah, I think the ones we got are the best kind of turbos out there at the moment. And we've got the lower tier of the brand, but they're still absolutely brilliant. Right. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, Sam. I'll see you in the weekly races, and thanks for everyone listening to the podcast. Hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions about a turbo for me or Sam, then please just drop them in the comments, and we'll get back to you.
Nice one.
Right. So that's it for this episode, and I'll see you in the next special guest episode. And Sam, thanks for being on.
No problem, Dale. Catch you later.
See you later.